Your bike engine isn't bulletproof. Even the toughest engines bite back if you treat it like junk. Most engines don't die from one big failure. They get chipped away by lazy habits. Stuff you shrug off now becomes an expensive rebuild later. From sloppy maintenance to avoidable mistakes, these habits slowly wear down your engine and rack up repair bills. These are 12 horrible habits that ruin your motorcycle engine and wallet. Let's start with the bad habit of ignoring valve clearance checks. If you're the type who thinks valve clearances are a mythical mechanic's tale, congratulations. You're setting your engine up for a slow, expensive death. Motorcycle engines are high-revving, high-compression machines, and the valve train is precision-engineered to operate within microscopic tolerances. When you skip those scheduled valve clearance checks, those clearances inevitably tighten as the valves and seats wear down. This happens especially on modern bikes that run hotter and rev higher than ever before. When clearances close up, you start losing compression. Cold starts get harder, idling turns get erratic, and you may notice a loss of power. The real problem isn't the inconvenience, though. It's that tight valves don't have time to cool against their seats, so they overheat and start to burn. Once a valve burns or warps, you're on the hook for a top-end rebuild, and possibly even a whole new cylinder head. Your wallet won't forgive you for it. But wait, it gets worse. Burned valves can lead to chunks breaking off and bouncing around the combustion chamber, shredding pistons, rings, and even the cylinder itself. This basically means that you're risking both rough running and catastrophic engine failure. Ignoring valve clearance checks costs you power, reliability, and destroys the most expensive, labor-intensive parts of your engine. Checking and adjusting clearances is fiddly and sometimes expensive, but it's nothing compared to the cost of a ruined head or a full engine swap. If you want to keep riding and not just paying bills, ignore this at your peril. Classify this under engine survival as opposed to optional maintenance. Next horrible habit is using cheap or incorrect oil. Treating your motorcycle's oil like an afterthought is how you turn a perfectly good engine into a salvage yard project. Motorcycles run on oil that meets very specific standards, and that makes using cheap oil, or the wrong grade, worse than suboptimal. It's a direct path to premature engine wear, clutch issues, and heat-related failures. Modern motorcycle engines generate far more heat per cubic inch than car engines, and many bikes use a wet clutch system that requires oil with specific friction modifiers. Pouring generic bargain bin oil into your engine means you're gambling with lubrication. That deal you believe you scored at the auto parts store is not formulated for high RPM shear forces or the clutch engagement your bike needs. That oil breaks down faster, loses viscosity, and leaves critical surfaces exposed when you use it. As the oil degrades, you're left with metal-on-metal contact, and you can expect to see accelerated cam and bearing wear, scored pistons, and, if you're unlucky, bits of clutch material floating through your oil passages. The wrong oil can also cause your wet clutch to slip, glazing the plates and leading to costly repairs, and sometimes even a roadside failure. Don't kid yourself into thinking that all oil is basically the same. Motorcycle engineers specify particular weights and ratings for a reason. If you ignore that, you're just sabotaging your own machine. It makes sense to spend a few extra bucks and buy the right oil every single time. Save a few bucks at first, and you'll pay 10 times more in repairs and downtime. Another bad habit to watch out for is running on old fuel. Old fuel is engine poison, to put it bluntly. Letting fuel sit in your tank or carbs for weeks or months is like signing up for a rough, idle, hard starts, misfires, and a repair bill you didn't budget for. Modern gasoline isn't made to last. It's loaded with additives and ethanol that start breaking down in as little as 30 days. As it ages, the volatile compounds evaporate, leaving behind a varnish-like sludge that gums up injectors, carb jets, and fuel lines. If you're running a carbureted bike, stale fuel will clog the jets and float valves and force you into a full strip-down and ultrasonic cleaning session. On a fuel-injected machine, you should expect your injectors to get sticky, leading to uneven fueling and persistent engine hesitation. Either way, you're looking at degraded performance, wasted fuel, and possible internal corrosion if moisture-laden ethanol separates and sits in the tank. Hard starting is the least of your worries. Old fuel can lean out your mixture, causing your engine to run hotter and less efficiently, and in extreme cases, damage pistons or valves. In the worst-case scenario, your bike would flat-out refuse to start. You can avoid all of this by using a fuel stabilizer if you're storing your bike, draining the tank for long periods, or simply riding more often. It's not complicated, but ignoring it will absolutely trash your fuel system, and eventually, your engine. Cheap neglect here translates directly into expensive repairs down the line. Use fresh fuel or be prepared to become best buddies with your mechanic. Neglecting spark plug. Maintenance is next on the list. Spark plugs are the match that lights the fire, so if you neglect them, your engine's heartbeat goes from strong to sputtering. Ignoring spark plug inspection or replacement means courting incomplete combustion, fouled electrodes, and, in the long run, severe engine problems. When plugs wear down, the gap widens and the spark weakens. This leads to misfires, rough, idle, sluggish throttle response, and worse fuel economy. In high-performance or high-revving engines, a bad plug can create enough unburned fuel to wash oil off cylinder walls, ramping up internal wear. If the electrode becomes coated in carbon, oil, or deposits from cheap gas, it loses all spark ability. The engine would run unevenly. Cylinder temperatures would become erratic, and your exhaust system would end up working overtime to clear the mess. Let it go long enough, and you'll stress other ignition components like your coils, leads, and the CDI ECU by forcing them to compensate for the weak or absent spark. On older bikes, fouled plugs can strand you by the roadside, and on newer ones, persistent misfires can trip the check engine light and force the ECU into limp mode, effectively killing your performance. If you're thinking, well, it's just one plug, remember that a dead cylinder puts uneven loads on the crank and rods, which accelerates engine wear. Eventually, the extra strain can cause outright mechanical failure. Checking and replacing plugs isn't hard or expensive, and skipping it is a rookie mistake that can wreck your engine and suck your wallet dry. Don't allow laziness to eat your money. Inspect them regularly, change them as specified, and then avoid a whole world of trouble. Also, try not to overheat the engine. Overheating is a death sentence for a motorcycle engine, and it doesn't care whether it's caused by low coolant, blocked radiators, busted fans, or pure rider stupidity. Unlike cars, motorcycle engines are exposed, air-cooled, or marginally water-cooled, and far less forgiving of thermal abuse. If you let the temp gauge spike too often, you'll see how quickly a bulletproof engine can go soft. For the soft, here's what happens. As temperatures climb, oil breaks down and loses its lubricating properties. The bearings start to suffer, and the piston rings lose their seal, causing blow-by and a rapid drop in power. Aluminum components, like your heads and pistons, expand more than they should and risk warping or even cracking. In a worst-case scenario, you get a blown head gasket, warped head, or piston seizure. None of these are cheap, but all of them are preventable. Let's face it, the weather can only be so much of a factor. Your poor maintenance and bad habits would be a bigger factor on the bike than the weather. Riding with clogged radiators, ignoring coolant levels, or creeping through city traffic while testing the red line isn't a flex. Many bikes also rely on airflow for cooling, so idling for ages or crawling in traffic can cook your engine even faster. Once you boil the coolant or let it run dry, the next stop is the repair shop. Ignoring overheating warnings, hoping it'll just cool down in a bit, is denial at its finest. If you notice temperature spikes, find the root cause immediately. Flush your coolant, check the fan, clean the radiator, and don't ride until it's sorted. One bad overheat can shave years off your engine's life. Remain vigilant for the sake of your engine. Improper clutch usage is another bad habit to watch out for. Abusing your clutch is a direct route to engine and gearbox damage. Holding the clutch halfway, riding the clutch, as the cool kids say, feathering it at every stop, or slipping it needlessly while riding uphill might seem harmless, but it turns your clutch plates into a smoking, friction-glazed mess. If you love money leaking out of your wallet every mile, please have at it. Motorcycle clutches are built to withstand hard launches and aggressive riding, but within reason. They're not designed to be used as a crutch for bad throttle control or constant low-speed crawling. Every time you drag that clutch unnecessarily, you generate excess heat. The friction plates glaze, lose grip, and start slipping under load. And eventually, the wear becomes irreversible. The plates thin out, the springs weaken, and you're left with a clutch that won't engage fully. And if you're unlucky, usually right when you need it most. It doesn't just end at the clutch. Clutch debris circulates through the oil, especially on wet clutch bikes, contaminating everything it touches. Tiny particles get pumped through bearings, gears, and sometimes even into the oil pump itself. Over time, this means increased wear throughout the entire engine and transmission. Bad habits like holding the clutch in at stoplights, constantly fanning it in slow traffic, or using it as a substitute for proper rev matching on downshifts all accelerate wear. When your clutch finally gives up, you'd be looking at a labor-intensive repair, especially on bikes where the engine has to come out for access. Stop treating your clutch like a stress ball. Learn proper throttle and gear control. And if you can't break the habit, get ready to break the bank. Clutch jobs aren't cheap, and the collateral engine damage usually adds up fast. Neglecting fuel system maintenance is another issue. Your engine can't run on garbage and vibes, so why do you treat the fuel system like an afterthought? Whether your bike is carbureted or fuel injected, the fuel delivery system is the artery of combustion. If you clog it, ignore it, or let it rot, and you'll choke your engine until it sputters, misfires, or dies in glorious death. For carbureted bikes, failing to clean the jets, floats, and bowls invites fuel varnish, sediment buildup, and sticky needles that ruin performance. You'll get a lean mixture, rough idling, throttle lag, and cold start nightmares. On fuel-injected bikes, neglect shows up in clogged injectors and a sputtering delivery curve. Fuel pressure drops, atomization suffers, and combustion becomes inefficient, robbing you of power and triggering long-term damage. Again, it gets worse. Water contamination, often from ethanol-laced fuel, corrodes internal components. Rust in the tank leads to debris in the lines. Fuel pumps wear out from running dry or fighting obstructions, and filters clog and force the pump to overwork, shortening its life. When the pump goes, you're done. No fuel pressure, no combustion, no ride. A neglected fuel system screws with your engine's balance. Lean conditions run hot and can burn valves or melt pistons under sustained abuse, and rich conditions foul plugs and load up the exhaust with unburned fuel, risking damage to the catalytic converter or muffler internals. This is your reminder that routine fuel system maintenance isn't optional. Run injector cleaner periodically, clean carbs annually if the bike sits, replace the fuel filter when the manual says you should, or sooner if you ride dirty gas. Ignoring the system means turning your engine into a wheezing liability, and you can't expect peak performance if you're feeding it through a clogged straw. Also, try not to overload the electrical accessories. Your motorcycle's electrical system isn't a bottomless power bank. It's designed with a strict power budget, and overloading it with extra lights, USB ports, heated gear, aftermarket horns, or whatever else you think makes your ride better is a guaranteed way to fry your stator, kill your battery, and cripple your charging system. Most bikes have a charging system output that barely covers the essential, which often include ignition, fuel pump, ECU, lights. When you add a bunch of accessories without checking the available amperage headroom, you start drawing more power than the stator can replenish. This forces your battery to fill in the gap, and eventually, the battery discharges faster than it charges, and you'd be left stranded with a dead system. When your stator is constantly working beyond its capacity, it overheats. The insulation breaks down, and before long, the coils start shorting internally. If you burn your stator, no charging is possible. To replace it is not cheap, and it may mean you have to remove the engine case, depending on the bike you use. Oh, and let's not forget the regulator/rectifier. When faced with excessive load variance or heat from overstressed stators, it fails too. This often means inconsistent voltage, spikes, and dips that fry sensors, blow fuses, and kill your ECU. If you have one accessory too many, you could be dealing with a cascade of electrical failures. There's a reason factory bikes come with limited accessory plugs. They assume you won't be running a mobile disco. Before adding anything, calculate your bike's output, factor in reserve margins, and use a fuse block or relay setup. Improvising with hacked wiring or lazy add-ons is how bikes catch fire. You should respect your charging system's limits. Doing otherwise pushes the damage deep into your engine's core systems. Using the wrong fuel type is also always a bad move. Most bike engines are built with a specific compression ratio and ignition timing in mind. Feeding the engine with fuel that's the wrong octane rating is an active assault on your combustion chamber. Once you use lower octane gas than recommended, you invite engine knock, power loss, overheating, and long-term internal damage. Octane rating is more about detonation resistance than it is about performance. Higher performance engines with tighter tolerances and higher compression ratios need higher octane to avoid premature ignition. If you put in 87 when the manual says 91, and the fuel air mix might ignite before the piston hits top dead center, that's what you call detonation, an uncontrolled explosion rather than a smooth burn. You won't always hear it, but your engine will feel it. The knock pounds the piston crown, rattles the connecting rods, and hammers the bearings, and over time, it causes microfractures, eats away at the piston edges, and stresses the crankshaft. You might not feel the damage immediately, but it accumulates until the engine loses compression, power, and efficiency. One day, it just gives up. Modern ECUs will try to compensate by retarding timing and adjusting fuel delivery, but that kills throttle response and power output. So not only are you damaging the engine, you're also sabotaging its performance and fuel economy. Using premium when it's not required isn't helpful either because you're just wasting money, but skimping on octane to save a few bucks is contributing to a false economy. It's like giving your engine a diet of bad fuel and expecting it to stay healthy. Check your owner's manual and use the recommended fuel. Not less, not more. If you cheap out at the pump, don't act surprised when your engine starts sounding like it's coughing up metal. Try not to ignore engine noises too. Engines talk, and thankfully for bikes, they don't whisper, they roar, but sometimes too, they scream or groan. Basically, they make themselves heard when something's wrong. If you ignore ticking, knocking, rattling, grinding, or whining sounds coming from your motorcycle, you're doing the mechanical equivalent of ignoring chest pains because you feel fine otherwise. Your bike would probably end up on a flatbed tow and a repair quote that makes your eyes water. Every abnormal sound tells a story. For instance, a sharp ticking might be caused by loose valves or a cam chain tensioner on its last legs. A deep knock could mean worn rod bearings or piston slap, and grinding may be transmission or clutch issues. Whining noises, on the other hand, means under-acceleration and could point to failing gears or shaft bearings, and none of these are cheap, quick fixes. But here's the problem. The longer you let it go, the more destructive it gets. What starts as a $20 gasket or a loose bolt can evolve into a warped head, chewed-up camshaft, or a seized crank. Once metallic shavings enter your oil, they get pumped through the engine and turn your lubrication system into a sandblaster. The words, "it's probably nothing," have bankrupted more riders than speeding tickets. Trust your ears. If the noise is new, persistent, or getting worse, stop riding and diagnose it. Even if you don't know the source, a quick inspection or mechanic check can save you thousands in the long run. Do not skip regular inspections under any circumstance. Maintenance isn't just about oil changes and chain lube. Regular inspections are your first line of defense against catastrophic failure. When you skip them, you're allowing yourself to ride blind until something snaps, leaks, grinds, or explodes. A basic once-over can spot issues before they turn into wallet-obliterating disasters. Neglect that frequently, and you're gambling every time you hit the starter. Frequently, check coolant levels, oil condition, brake fluid clarity, tire pressure, cable slack, and fastener tightness. Although these are not deep diagnostics that would reveal every single problem with the bike, they're surface-level checks that still reveal a ton. A cracked vacuum line, a loose axle nut, or a seeping gasket may not kill your engine today, but they'll absolutely start a chain reaction that ends with metal-on-metal carnage. Take a leaking fork seal, for instance. Ignore it, and it contaminates your front brake pads, compromising your stopping power. A frayed throttle cable, on the other hand, could mean that your next stop could be a stuck throttle at 90 miles per hour. Every missed detail is a potential failure point, and most of them are stupidly easy to catch. That is, if you bother to look. This also applies to your engine internals by proxy. A cracked hose lets in air and causes lean mixtures. A dirty oil sight glass or unexplained oil loss could be early signs of a failing head gasket or worn rings. Electrical tape on a sensor lead is not a minor repair, but a ticking time bomb. Do a walk-around. Learn your service intervals. Actually, read your owner's manual. Inspections don't take long, but the damage from skipping them lasts forever. When your engine grenades and you're left with a pile of shredded aluminum, do not forget that the problem didn't suddenly happen. It was because you just didn't look when it told you to. This is not implying that your bike won't wear with age. All that's being said is that you can greatly prolong the life of your bike when you do the right thing. Improper storage practices would also always harm your bike. Parking your bike and walking away for the season is not storage. It's abandonment. Improper storage quietly destroys your engines through neglect, corrosion, and fuel system decay. If you let your motorcycle sit for months without preparing it properly, you'll return to a machine that's sluggish, corroded, or dead. First, fuel. When left in the tank or carbs, it breaks down and forms varnish. This gums up jets, clogs injectors, and turns your engine into a no-start mess. In fuel-injected bikes, it can even wreck the pump. Ethanol-laced gas also absorbs moisture, like we mentioned earlier, which can lead to rust in the tank and water in the fuel system, neither of which your engine would forgive in the long run. Next, oil. Used oil contains acidic byproduct ejects and combustion contaminants. Leave it sitting in the crankcase, and those chemicals get time to eat away at bearings and internal surfaces. It's the same with coolant. If you let old, acidic coolant stew in your engine all winter, you shouldn't be shocked when your water pump seals start leaking in spring. Next, your battery. If you didn't hook it up to a tender, it's probably flat. Worse still, a deeply discharged battery can sulfate, damaging it permanently or forcing the charging system to overcompensate and burn out the stator. And let's not forget condensation. Engines that sit unstarted in cold, moist environments build up internal moisture, especially if the airbox or exhaust is open. That leads to corrosion in cylinder walls, valves, and the crankcase. One season of lazy storage can cut years off your engine's life. When you store your bike, do it right, with fuel stabilizer, clean oil, full tank, battery tender, and sealed intakes. Anything less is mechanical neglect. You wouldn't leave your dog outside all winter without food. Please do not do it to your engine. If you ride, own, or even think about motorcycles frequently, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. We break down the real stuff that keeps your bike running and your money where it belongs.